Hello, Blue Jays fans, and welcome to episode 260 of the Jays from the Couch radio podcast, brought to you by, of course, jaysfromthecouch.com. We're streaming live at you like we do every Monday evening at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on Facebook and YouTube and Twitter. We record this podcast live for your viewing pleasure, and where you can even comment and ask questions directly into the show. We'll put them up here on the screen, and you can be a part of this journey. But if you miss the live stream video, don't worry. The audio version of our podcast will be live on, well, I suppose it's not live, but you can catch it anytime on Spotify and Stitcher and Google and Apple. Anywhere you find a podcast, you'll find Jays from the Couch. So look us up there. I'm your host, as always, Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. We've got a great episode for you this week. It is going to be spicy. I'm not even joking. We've got a 6-game losing streak, which isn't exactly the kind of seeds you plant for a good podcast show. But guess what? It's going to be a great one. We're going to look at why the Blue Jays have lost 6 in a row, and whether or not there's any hope, whether or not the season is lost. And it's not even the end of May. But, still, to help me dive into the great depression that is the Toronto Blue Jays over the last week, I've got Jays from the Couch writer and host, Sunny Side of the Dome, on Thursdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time on our YouTube channel. Karen Sutar, good evening to you.
And good evening, Shaun.
I hope you're ready. It's going to be a fun one.
As ready as the Blue Jays were today.
Maybe we'll blow it in the later innings. Anyway, to help us dive into this, the Feckless Wonder, host of the On Feck Circle Tuesdays at 6 p.m. Eastern Time, Steve Feck, good evening to you, sir.
Hey, Shaun. Hey, Karen. Happy Victoria Day. Obviously, it's not Happy Victory Day, but it's Happy Victoria Day. So, I want to put that out there. I mean, there are some Americans that actually respect Canadian tradition, so I wanted to make sure I got that out there for you.
Well, and it can't be Victory Day, right? Because as Canadians, we can't have it all, and we're okay with that. So we get an extra day off work.
Yeah, isn't this called the long weekend?
May 2-4 weekend. That's right. Okay. Yeah. Oh man, depending on your outlook, you will need a 2-4 to get through this weekend. You would have needed it. The Toronto Blue Jays have lost 6 games in a row, including being swept by ye old Tampa Bay Rays, who, and let's be real, at the beginning of the season, finally, I said, you know what? Okay, they're legit. Year after year, I'm like, This year I said, you know what? Screw it. They're in. They're legit. And then they got off to a bit of a shaky start, and now here they are winning like 800 games in a row. I think today was their 11th or 12th. At that point, I've run out of fingers, so it's they're legit, right? And early on in the season, the Blue Jays faced them and did rather well, which is, cause for celebration around these parts. Here we are near the end of May, and the fortunes of these two teams have gone in opposite directions. So, Karen, I'm going to start with you. 6-game losing streak. What is going on here? Just kind of an overall general take, I guess, is what I'm looking for here, because we are going to dive into some specifics, but
Okay, well, first off, you know that this is completely your fault, right? You remember last week saying that at some point there was going to be a losing streak. So before today's episode is over, if you would be so kind as to say that the losing streak is going to stop and that they'll start winning again, that would really help.
You know what? I actually might. If I saw anything over the last 6 days that would encourage me to think that a losing streak is going to end.
Right. Well,
but I'll I'll stop interrupting.
No, that's okay. I mean, I've been watching this team for many, many years. 2015, 2016 was great. And even honestly, I'd say after 2015, they were on their way down because in 2016 they were kind of lucky to squeeze into the wild card spot on the last day of the regular season, whereas 2015, the last couple months of that season, no one could touch them. Like they were amazing. And the slide kind of happened starting in 2016, and then for a few years there, 2017, all of 2018, and the first half of 2019, they weren't even contenders. They weren't even close. They were pretenders, and it was heartbreaking to watch as a Jays diehard. But I mean, they would go out there, and it's not like they were just getting beat in games. It's not like they were really close and really in the hunt for most of the game, and then they just lost out. I mean, they were losing games, and I had the misfortune to go to a lot of these games. They were losing 11-1, 15-1, 19-1. I mean, when your team's getting blown out like that, it's very hard to find the positives. You look at this 6-game losing streak, and the fortunate thing, if you can find a fortunate thing, is that, and here's Velvet. Oh my God, you guys, this is getting to be a weekly thing. The fortunate thing, if you can find one, is that a lot of these games were winnable games. Now, you can look at glass half empty and say, well, if they were winnable games, they should have found a way to win. They should have found ways to win. But I think that's going to come. I think them being that close means that they're a tweak or two. They're this tweak in baseball, if you will, away from actually turning some of those losses into wins. I mean, some things have been decisions that, well, let's just say I hope that we don't see a lot more of Santiago Espinal bunting with 2 strikes unless he turns himself into a very good bunter, and if he does, then great for him. Like they make mistakes, that's fine. I hope that it's things that they actually learn from and don't repeat. But I mean, there's positives there. They need some guys to come off the injured list, and I mean, right now the lower half of the lineup between Espinal, Jonathan Davis, and either Jansen or McGuire, they're not that great with the bat. So, I mean, if you just get George Springer and Alejandro Kirk back at some point in the season, then all of a sudden your lineup becomes that much longer. So I think there's help to be had within the organization. There's the injured list. There's possibly a call-up or two if when they deem that someone is truly ready. I think Thomas Hatch might even be the first one up from the minor leagues, and then there's the possibility of some trades down the road. So we'll see.
Right. And before I throw it over to Steve, I will point out that, Karen, while last week I did say a losing streak is going to happen, I seem to recall a black cat walking across the screen. So
69 Cubs. 69 Cubs against the Mets. The black cat.
So it seems to me that we are equally to blame for this past week.
She's trying to walk, and I'm not letting her.
All
right, Steve. In your mind, over the last week, what's the deal here? It's because it's been rough.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I'm going to give you a dirty Blue Jays colored glasses approach to this. We watched a week of playoff baseball. We did. These were really playoff caliber games. The Jays were up against opponents that they would either potentially meet in the playoffs or whatever it is, and they gave it their all. They came back multiple times. They tried jumping out to early leads. That didn't work. They tried coming back. That didn't work. But still, they were in it. And what this now gives fans, I know it's not going to give the front office this idea, but it's going to give fans the idea that, hey, you know what? We're pretty good, but we need to add, and we need to add soon, because we hung tough. Okay, as long as that game, and the game is officially over, right? Because it seemed like we're going to do this podcast at like midnight, the way the game was going. But it's a measuring stick, and I think it was really important for us, and we all did. Yes, we all suffered. 6 games in a row is never fun, but we got to see how our team would stack up if these were playoff series against these teams, and now we know what we need to try to encourage our front office to try to do.
And you know what? Maybe there's something to that, and maybe that's a way to look at the entire season, really, right? And Karen has said, I've lost track of how many times Karen has said this is not a finished product yet, right? And so maybe rather than, and I don't know. Either way, like I'm not saying this is how I feel they should proceed, but maybe they feel like, okay, let's use this 2021 season to see where we really are, right? And how we stack up. We've made some excellent additions, and we're gonna talk about one of those additions this episode, but we're not there yet. But let's see where we actually are. And so maybe there isn't one of these kind of 2015-esque trade deadlines to be had, and that was never going to happen. I don't know. But it seems to me, listening to you talk about, these are playoff series, and I don't disagree with you there. I wonder if maybe this year wasn't about going deep into the playoffs. Maybe it was a full season of let's just go as far as we can. I don't know.
Well, it is now.
But maybe it always was. Right? Like, maybe. I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there because you said that, and I was like, well, yeah, okay. So maybe it was never part of the plan. I don't know. We'll see, I suppose, because there's still, let's see, 2 whole months before the trade deadline, right? So there's lots of time for whatever's going to happen.
Long months.
Yep. It could be 2 long months if the last 6 games are a real indication of what this Blue Jays team is. However, once again, they have not faced the Tigers. They have not faced the Orioles. They have not faced those less than teams, right? So there is a possibility that while they may be playing playoff opponents, they haven't yet played the non-playoff opponents yet, right? And maybe it all evens out. Who knows? I'm trying, Steve, for the love of God, I'm trying to find some positivity here. And you also mentioned, and Karen, I'd like to get your thoughts on this too, the Blue Jays and their battling, right? Whether it's in at-bats, and I gotta say, I am incredibly impressed with the new approach at the plate for this team as a whole. The going the opposite way, it's why Randall Grichuk is not striking out 8 million times. You know what I mean? And they're going the other way. Bo Bichette is a master at it. And that, to me, they're battling in a way we have not seen them before. Right. And I think, to me, that's taking it an extra step. So, Karen, I wonder if you might chime in on we can go on about, and we're going to go on about one of the big problems with this team. But for right now, let's start with some positivity. The offense and just how the team in general has been able to grind out at-bats and innings and games.
Right. Yeah. I mean, in the off season going into this season, I think most people who knew anything about the Jays figured that, they weren't going to have a problem getting hits. They weren't going to have a problem scoring runs. And after a slow start, other than Guerrero and maybe Randall Grichuk, so many of them are doing exactly that. I mean, and this is one criticism, one frustration that I've had with them over the last several years up until this year is that, I'm not going to say that it's bad when the team that I like hits home runs. I love it when the team that I like hits home runs. But if you want to be a serious contender, you have to be able to score runs in ways other than the home run. You can't over rely on the home run because you aren't going to hit home runs every single day, particularly when you get to the playoffs. When you get to the playoffs, you're facing other really good pitching, and they might not be giving up a lot of home runs. So you've got to find other ways to score. And this year, the Jays are doing that. They've had a number of games where they've put a number of runs on the board, and they either haven't hit a home run, or the other day it was 6-0, and then they finally hit a 2-run home run late in the game, or they'd scored 6 runs and they won the game, whatever it was, but without the benefit of the home run. So I love the fact that they're able to string hits together. And I mean, today was a bit of a contrast to that because every run that they scored was on a home run. However, I mean, like I say, home runs are great, but you have to expand your repertoire and be able to do other things as well as. And talking about Bo Bichette, I mean, and I really like Bo Bichette, and I hate to single him out for anything. He's already a really good major league player, and he's so young. He's only a year older than Guerrero. He has less major league experience between being a very late call-up and all the time he's missed with injury. Bo Bichette is already a good hitter, but he lacks so much plate discipline. I mean, today he struck out on a pitch that was a foot outside. You don't see Guerrero doing that. That's one of the good things that we always heard about Guerrero, and he seems to be playing up to his potential with the bat this year. That's one of the things about him, is that he's not his father, who would chase pitches anywhere and actually get hits on them. Guerrero Jr. actually takes his pitches and he takes his walks if you don't throw him a strike. I mean, can you imagine, with the ability that Bichette already has and what he's already accomplished, if he could learn to lay off those pitches that aren't strikes, he would be that much better and the lineup would be that much better. But yeah, I mean, I'm not that worried about the lineup overall. I mean, they're doing what they're doing, with just a top half of the order. But when you get George Springer back, assuming that Alejandro Kirk comes back at some point, I mean, you've got them instead of, say, Jonathan Davis and either McGuire or Jansen. A lot of the time, I'm not handing Kirk the starting catching job. But if he's healthy and back on the roster, he'll be playing a good bit of the time. So yeah, all of a sudden you've got this very scary looking lineup, and that's some of the positives for the Jays fans.
For sure. I mean, Springer and Kirk is much better than Davis and McGuire, for sure. Steve, I wanted to get your thoughts because you have a background in scouting and stuff like that. And so when you watch these games, what is it that you're seeing that you're enjoying?
I'm enjoying that every player has really taken that step forward in their plate approach. Now, I will counter what Karen said by saying that if Bo Bichette is less aggressive, he's not Bo Bichette. To me, it's and let's use the Tampa Bay Rays as a whole team. They lead the major leagues by a lot in strikeouts. I think coming into today, they had struck out 504 times already. And I forgot how many strikeouts that they had. But Bo Bichette, I think, loses a little bit of edge if he's not following his instincts and being aggressive at the plate. So, I mean, okay, is it frustrating when he chases a ball like that? Sure it is. But isn't it great when on the first pitch, you see him drive the ball the opposite way? And if you're less aggressive, you're going to take that first pitch. You're not going to be as aggressive. And I've seen him swing at some balls. I don't know how he hit him, but he did on the first pitch. So I think from that standpoint, every hitter, Teoscar Hernandez has become more aggressive in the strike zone. Not necessarily more aggressive swing at everything, but in the strike zone, he seems to be clicking and saying, okay, I'm going to hunt a breaking pitch here, or I'm going to hunt the changeup here. And he has taken huge strides compared to what he was before. So I think for me, that's a takeaway for me. Each of the hitters, even those that are struggling, Biggio has struggled. He's he came back a little bit more before he got hurt. Danny Jansen at least looks like he's not a little league hitter anymore. He's actually a professional baseball player. Maybe not with the results, but there aren't many hitters that really look lost. Jonathan Davis has been more aggressive and tried to drive the ball more. So that's really the positive things that have come out of the offense and the approach this year. It's not just confidence. I mean, and this is something that I will tip my hat to Charlie Montoya about. He turns things over to his hitters, I think, in a lot of cases, and say, do what you do. So rather than change Bo, or rather than change Biggio, or whoever you want to pick, he lets his players pitch. And if they get thrown out, or if there's a mistake, he's the first one to stand up and say, well, you know what? We don't want to take that away from him. So I think that's the positive offensive aspect of the Blue Jays throughout the year.
All right. So I noticed that you went through and both of you neglected to mention Marcus Semien. And I thought before the show, and I even tweeted that I have to come at Steve a little bit here over the Marcus Semien signing. And here's why. Okay. In 200 plate appearances, he's hitting .286, an on-base percentage of .351, a weighted runs created plus of 141, already put up 2.1 wins above replacement with his 11 home runs and 28 runs batted in and 8 stolen bases. So when this signing happened, when they signed Marcus Semien for $18 million, I scratched my head because it didn't seem like he was necessary. But Steve, you were more, how do I say this, more vocal about
emphatic
about what a bad idea this was. So my question to you, Steve, is, are you ready, or have you thought about backtracking on that stance on Marcus Semien?
The only thing that I will backtrack, and I need to backtrack on, is that I said that he would never have a year like 2019 again. That was a blip on the radar. He's having that kind of year. But what did we just touch on about the Blue Jays? Everybody knew they were going to score runs, and they're going to have, offense. So you have $18 million. You've got a huge hole in your rotation, huge hole at third base. So me personally, like, if I have a hole in my roof, I'm not worried about my shingles outside of the front of my house. I'm worried about filling the hole in the roof. So that's and I will go down to the last game, whether it's in a playoff game or a game where they fall out. I will go down saying this was a stupid misappropriation of funds. Has Marcus Semien been great? Yes, he has. And that's why I backtracked saying, okay. In fact, I'll say, okay, well, let's. The Feckless Wonder officially admits that he's a dope. And he said that Marcus Semien would never have a year like 2019 again. So obviously, I must apologize for that. But we still don't have starting pitchers, and we still don't have a third baseman. And what happened when Semien got signed? You moved Kevin Biggio to third base. And his injury was fielding related, not something from a swing. It's almost like it's not quite a whiplash injury, but it's very similar to what he's suffering right now. When you have a ligament in the cervical spine up near your neck, that's almost like a whiplash kind of thing. So you've created a bigger defensive hole at third base by putting somebody there that just unfortunately, and I thought I was wrong there too. The Feckless Wonder was wrong. Kevin Biggio is not a major league third baseman. That created issues for the pitching staff. So that is why Marcus Semien is still a stupid signing.
Fair.
Despite his immense talent and his production, it was a stupid signing. It's not Marcus Semien's fault. The front office is stupid.
And I'm no medical expert, but I believe Biggio's injury may have been caused by watching all of the balls go past him.
Well, that was by subtle whiplash.
Right. Right.
I was hoping somebody would pick up on it. But yes.
So, Karen, do you want to weigh in on Marcus Semien before we move on?
Sure, I do. So you look at this past off season and a couple of things. So I think all of us and Jays fans and we've all got our opinions, all right. Where are the Jays doing well and what are their areas of needs? And aside from pitching, I think almost everybody would have agreed that they really need a third baseman. And so I waited as a lot of us did. Okay, are they going to acquire a third baseman? Is there someone they can trade for? Is there someone good out there that they can sign? And they didn't do that. And then they brought in Marcus Semien. And I thought, okay, so he's been a shortstop, so they're going to slide him over to third base? No, their plan is to use him at second base. It kind of seemed like if you've got this puzzle and you've already got a piece, it's like they had a piece to put where there was already a piece, and meanwhile there was a hole someplace else. And to me, it didn't really make that much sense. And another thing, it reminded me of a couple of in-season trades going all the way back to 1993. So the Blue Jays reacquired Tony Fernandez, who wasn't doing well elsewhere. They brought him back to the Jays where he started, and it wasn't really that big a deal as far as the hype and the media and all that. And that ended up being their best in-season move, was reacquiring Tony Fernandez, because he came back and he was just amazing. The deadline deal that they ended up making was trading for Ricky Henderson, this big leadoff superstar, and he was all right. He got on base, he drew a lot of walks, scored some runs that way, but really, I'm not sure that the Jays got the production from Henderson that they really expected when they traded for him. And the parallel I see is, here's George Springer. Now, I'm not saying he's going to be a bust, and knock on wood, he's going to come back and really produce for the team, but so far, he was the big acquisition with all the hype, and so far we've gotten 4 games from him. And whereas the more under the radar signing, relatively speaking, Semien, he's the one who's just gone out and produced. And I was a little on the fence when they signed him, just because, I mean, you look at his whole career and you didn't really know. Like you said, I mean, prior to this year, he'd had one good offensive season. Now, it was the last full season, which was 2019, so it wasn't all that long ago. But other than that, you look at the rest of his numbers, and they weren't all that great. And I wasn't really sure who the Jays were getting. And man, if he thought 2019 was a career year, like so far, he looks to be on pace to surpass that, I'd say. So I put out on Twitter a while back, dear Blue Jays, please extend Marcus Semien, and I got like 50 likes. And Steve, I think you were the only person that didn't particularly like the tweet. Three things in life that are guaranteed: death, taxes, and Steve and I disagreeing about the Jays. So there you go.
If I could just jump in real quickly, because I love the puzzle analogy.
Sure.
So we're putting together a puzzle of a Blue Jay. And we have one piece up by, the plumage that we just can't find. Are we looking for a blue piece, or are we looking for a red, as in red herring piece? Marcus Semien, it might fit by the notches. He's a red herring piece. So you don't put the red piece on the Blue Jay plumage. That's all. That's my only.
No, I think the puzzle thing works, and for me, I picture that slide puzzle, right? Because when you move one piece to put it in a spot to give you an overall advantage, you end up moving another into a spot that actually just gets in your way. And that's why I hate the friggin' things, because they're the worst. Anyway, last point here goes to Tony Mattingly, watching on YouTube. Appreciate it, Tony. Thanks for tuning in. He says, at least Vladdy is trying his best to start being the legit MVP candidate. When Trout is out, let's let the rest of the league have a chance. Absolutely. Amen to that. Now, before the season started, I would have said, in fact, I did say Bo Bichette will be a an MVP finalist, and Vladdy is doing his best to prove me wrong, because, and I believe Karen said, this is Vladdy's year, and oh man, is she ever right so far.
He said he was going to be league MVP, I think.
I believe you
Yes, you
did.
did.
So one thing before we get out of here, one thing I wanted to touch on was, and I asked this to the Jays from the Couch group, this current losing streak. Is it a matter of, and Karen, I'll start with you, is this a matter of the Blue Jays situation, and Steve would tell you that the lack of effort put into the starting rotation means that the bullpen is exhausted. And I guess my question is, are we seeing the fallout of a rotation that was not addressed, either, through moves, but also injuries and lack of performance and all of that stuff? And are we currently seeing the effect of an exhausted bullpen?
It's such a hard question to answer. I mean, has the bullpen been forced to throw too many innings? Yes, they have. I don't think there's any question there. I mean, they've thrown the most innings in all of MLB. Wasn't that a stat out there? And that's got to change. Now, I mean, unlike last season, we do have starting pitchers that are pitching into the 6th and 7th inning. And to me, if a guy gets into the 7th inning and hopefully completes the 7th inning, I'm happy with his performance. I mean, part of the problem has been that outside of Ryu, Ray, and Mats, and Mats has been a little inconsistent, but for the most part, you look at the three of them, and they've been pretty solid, but it's that number 4 and 5 starter that just really hasn't come together. I mean, either there's been injuries or their performance just hasn't warranted leaving them out there. I mean, yeah, you can leave them out there, but then you're probably going to lose the game the way they're going. Like, at least they're trying to make moves in game, and I don't know. I mean, I don't know what to make of Ross Stripling. I mean, he went out and pitched 7 scoreless innings today. He didn't pitch the first. But I mean, to me, and he talks about maybe making some mechanical adjustments. If he can do something like that for the Jays on a regular basis, then we've got another solid piece to the rotation to add to Ryu, Ray, and Steven Matz. I mean, Steven Matz last time out, he pitched 6 innings and 5 of them were scoreless. So, I mean, at least he battled back from one bad inning and went on and pitched well. So, I don't know. I don't think that all is lost or anything. I just, right. I think it's, they got to kind of, the squeaky wheel gets the oil, and I think there's things they need to oil so that they move more smoothly. And
yeah. And the other thing that I would add to that too is that if you look around baseball, how many teams are going through the same situation where they have a 4th and 5th spot in the rotation that is just a giant, massive question mark, right? And so, there's that, which kind of brings us back to the point from the beginning of the show about there not being a finished product. But Steve, I wanted to get your thoughts on are we seeing just the result of a tired bullpen?
Well, I almost never spit out numbers.
If it has a plus after it, I am going to poop my pants.
It does not. It actually is a real stat that's been calculated for 100 and some odd years in baseball. Bullpen ERA in April, 2.52. Going into today, it was 4.62. And just quick math in my head, it went up probably a quarter of a run just with the performance at the end of the game today. That would be an indication of 2 things. 1, the tired bullpen, and the depth that everybody talked about. There's depth and there's quality depth. Let's take, again, Rays versus Jays. The Rays have lost 5 guys from their World Series pitching staff to injury, and actually long-term injury, already this year. But they have the one thing that the Rays can always do is develop pitchers. So they have truly quality depth to draw from to fill in those holes. And so they can utilize this strategy that they've popularized of openers and piggybacking and whatever else you want to call it. The Blue Jays pitchers were not drafted, nor were they developed up until last year to fit into those roles. So you're going to have issues of guys, depth. Yes, you could pull them up when you have injuries. They have not been developed to fill those roles. And I know it's Victoria Day, but I'm going to use a U.S. Civil War analogy here. The Blue Jays are the Confederate Army. Charlie Montoyo is Robert E. Lee. Yes, I'm comparing him to Robert E. Lee, perhaps one of the greatest military minds of all time. Somehow, Robert E. Lee took the limited pieces that he had and, found a way to really defeat a better financed, more heavily, they had more weapons and more, ammunition. And they did that for a while. So for the first 2 years or so of the war, that happened. Eventually, the Confederate States just didn't have the resources. They still could bring people up, but they didn't have the ammunition. They didn't have the infrastructure and transportation. They just didn't have the weapons they needed to compete against a stronger opponent. So that's what we have seen in this losing streak and against playing these teams. The Blue Jays just don't have the weapons compared to the other teams.
Yep. And you know what? The results are speaking for themselves, but I would argue that given everything Toronto's gone through, maybe the Dodgers might be the only team in baseball that can weather this kind of rash of injuries and whatnot. But
the Rays have. Yankees are starting to. White Sox have. Astros have. Padres have.
I would love to see a comparison side by side of how many injuries and to whom those injuries have occurred before I concede your point, because I feel like Toronto has had key injuries to some key players that other teams that took a significant chunk of their talent to the IL. But again, that's just a gut feeling. I would love to see a comparison, and maybe by next week we'll have that comparison, and I will be willing to concede the point.
I'll work on the article starting tonight.
Oh, boy.
Perfect. All right, so we're just out of time here. So, Karen, let everybody know how they can follow you and all that fun stuff.
Yes. So I'm on Twitter at Karen Sutar1. That's SOUTAR1. And when I say that I'm on Twitter, I'm actually on there quite a lot. So you can find me pretty easily, and love to chat respectfully in both ways. So whether that's baseball or a lot of other topics. And Shaun, if you're not going to say that, this Blue Jays losing streak is ending soon. And pretty soon it's going to be a distant memory.
Well, I was saving it for the end, but yes, I think the more of us that say it, the better. All right, and don't forget, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening at home, Karen's show, Sunny Side of the Dome, every Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern Time. Karen blends her unique mixture of positivity and logic, and it is must watch. Very knowledgeable, and the podcast is just a small sample of what you get. So tune in Thursdays at 6 p.m. for Sunny Side of the Dome. Steve, let everybody know how they can follow you.
Okay. Well, I want to follow up on Sunny Side of the Dome is a must follow. Karen on Twitter is a must follow. That show, if you tune into my show, The On Feck Circle, you pretty much can assume 50% stupidity, 50% insight. With Karen, it's all in. Okay. She's just way too nice of a person to go on the tirades that I go on. So again, everybody right now, mark it in your calendar, Thursday, 6 p.m. Eastern Time. You need to be watching and following sunny side of the dome.
Thank
Beyond
you.
Feck Circle tomorrow, I would start drinking early if you're going to tune in. But we are, it's on the YouTube channel. You can follow me at US of J's. And I do have a US of J's Facebook page where I do a daily video diary. So if you don't get enough of my obnoxiousness here, and then Tuesday, there's a daily dose that you can tune in for as well.
There you go. So thank you both for yet another great episode, episode 260. I cannot believe 260 episodes of the Jays from the Couch podcast. And we're still going strong every week. You can tune in Monday at 6 p.m. Eastern time on YouTube and Facebook and Twitter. And if you missed the live show, don't worry. The audio version is available on Apple and Google. Everywhere you find a podcast, you'll find the audio version as well. So head to jaysfromthecouch.com for all your Blue Jays content. And for Karen, for Steve, for everybody at Jays from the Couch, this is Shaun Doyle. You can follow me on Twitter at Doyle JFtC. Hoping life gives you a juicy fastball down the middle and you don't miss it. Take care.
Happy